So it feels like everything that could be said has been said. So I'll say ditto, ditto, ditto. I concur with many of the comments that have been made. But I am going to, if you'll indulge me, I'm going to spend a little bit of time on history. I was just looking at that picture of me up there. It seems like decades and decades ago, and it probably was about 15 years ago, perhaps. So I prefer those younger pictures of myself. But I wanted to spend a little time, in addition to thanking you all for being here and to build on Frank's comments in particular. This is a global community trying to solve a global problem, and it is one at scale. And so I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about the approach that we have taken here in California, because oftentimes, as the governor is very fond of saying, as California goes, so goes the nation. And when it comes to climate policy, going back to my first boss, Governor Jerry Brown, and then before that, Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, and continuing under Governor Gavin Newsom, the fact is we have set very ambitious goals and targets. We have really relied on science, and bringing agriculture into the conversation is not necessarily where things started. Where things started with producers was, oh, it sounds like you're blaming us about a problem. And we've been able to turn that around to part of the solution. It is not a problem to get rid of. It is a problem to dig into and consider how agriculture as an essential food provider is also central to our climate solutions. Those opportunities we have to sequester carbon, and with great leadership from our livestock sector, and in particular, I have to call out our dairy sector, really leaning into sustainability and looking at it from the side of a producer with how will this help me with my economic sustainability, my family generational transition sustainability, and the sustainability of the very natural resources I depend upon for the productivity that I have here. That when we can turn that dialogue around, and that's where we started 16 years ago when I became, almost 16 years ago, became Secretary of the California Department of Food and Agriculture. It was engaging with roundtables of growers by crops, by regions, by livestock sectors of how were they thinking about climate change versus weather, which is on the daily mind of any producer. How were they thinking about it? Where were their concerns? And how would be the most constructive way of engaging them to think about a future of a changing climate? That was very instructive to us. We had no idea how deeply we would become engaged, not only at the local level, but also nationally and internationally. And that really helped us really build on a law that actually passed in 1995. And I remember being a lobbyist. You do need lobbyists and advocates in the world. That I was really a strong advocate of that law because it was called the Environmental Farming Act. And that Environmental Farming Act created a science advisory panel to really look at not only environmental impacts of farming, but to look at the farming benefits to identify the net benefit of farming, which really started to frame out how can we approach this in a positive way so a producer who often in a highly urbanized state, dominated by an urbanized legislative body, doesn't always feel like I'm to blame for everything in the world. Let's also think about these trade-offs that we do. Our science panel is made up of sister agency technical experts, independently appointed by their secretary of their agency to our board, in addition to producers. It has been the architect of our climate smart ag programs. We really capitalized at that time of the Obama administration under Secretary Vilsack, which identified the building blocks for climate smart agriculture: healthy soils, on-farm water use efficiency, improved nutrient management, all of those aspects that now are what we just consider climate smart agriculture. The methane part wasn't quite as evident in that, but it was there. And we were able to align the architecture of our climate smart ag practices to align to those federal usages, because we knew that they were working on creating global alliances And it would do us no good on a global challenge like climate change to only focus on something that would work in California. We're not prescribing it as a solution for every other country or every other sector, but we wanted to make sure that there was an alignment, that we had a shared vocabulary around the kinds of problems we were trying to solve, and the practical, flexible, on farm responsiveness of how we could craft solutions. Our very first program actually came out of drought, and we actually looked at it as a multi benefit problem to be solved. It's our on farm water use efficiency program, which we were able to measure greenhouse gas emission reductions by improved pumping capacity. That's how we measured that, by saving energy, a benefit to the grower. It saved water, the applied water, and applied it much more efficiently in a state that still had a lot of flood irrigation. And we knew that the more you can improve your irrigation practices, you're also improving your nutrient management, which mitigated the nitrate issues we have in our groundwater. That became an example of success for how we built our second oldest program. The SWEET program is over 12 years old. Our methane reduction program is over 12 years old as well. These are our two oldest programs. Dairy digesters, which we recognized after the first year, needed not only the partnership of our dairy sector, but also the allowance of dairy digester professionals in the field of building and managing, with partnerships with our farmers for dairy digesters, hoping that there would be revenue streams for that in the renewable energy sector. And it's worked very, very well. But we also knew all dairies didn't want to have a dairy digester, which is almost like operating a utility. They also wanted alternative manure management practices. And so these are the two strategies that we've been able to use, and at a scale that works for California. Over $400 million has been invested in dairy digesters, alternative manure management practices, and the Dairy Plus program that Virginia has already referenced, which is funded through a USDA grant in partnership with the Dairy Research Foundation here in California. That program has already invested $41 million. And as was announced today, we have an additional $34 million. We have over 377 projects on the ground, and our reduction in methane emissions is 28 million metric tons CO2 equivalents over the lifetime of these projects. That's almost 7 million cars coming off the road. Agriculture can be a challenge, but it is a huge part of the solution. And I am so pleased with how these programs have succeeded, of really partnering with our farmers, partnering with our researchers, partnering with others in the philanthropic community, building out global alliances like the Methane Climate Partnership and other aspects of that. But that's the scale that we've been able to prove this out. At the end of the day, it doesn't happen because of one sector, one country, one government entity, and as great as our academic institutions, one academic institutions. We have a multitude of MOUs with other countries where we always focus on business to business, farmer to farmer, academic to academic, which is usually the door opener for everything. And then bringing in policy to make sure, to the extent that we can agree on the outcomes that we're looking for, we can align policy for the sake of making business easier to do, not only to grow nutritious food, get it to people, but to do it in the most environmentally way possible. So there's lots of challenges I could talk about, but I think I'm going to save that because I saw a peek preview of some of the questions that I think that the dean and I will be talking about. So with that, I'm going to sit down so that we can all get to dinner tonight eventually, because I haven't eaten yet today and I'm hungry. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Secretary Ross. And Dean Stokes, if you could come on up, I have a Slido announcement. We are going to be changing the Slido room. I didn't know there's rooms. To day one, leadership in a changing agricultural policy landscape. I think the two of you, you could make yourself comfortable. Yeah, pick whatever chairs you want. And then when I have the updated Slido, I'll bring it back so you can take audience questions.
Great, great. Well, great. Well, thank you. And thank you for the background information. And I also just have to say thank you for all the many collaborations and just, these issues that we're talking about. I mean, you mentioned, these are global in scale, very complex. I really appreciate how you approach sustainability, very multifaceted, and thinking about the sustainability of our producers and their businesses, and it impacts our communities. And I can just say that Secretary Ross has been such an incredible champion and partner in keeping those perspectives throughout, and really just being such an amazing champion for that. So thank you. We really appreciate that very much. So just thinking about that, and you mentioned just some of the challenges, but just what have been some of the challenges to implementing climate solutions? And then you talked about some of the creative ways that the state has overcome some of these limitations to really implementing. And can you discuss some of those?
Yeah. So the first one is just uncertainty is not kind to business. And so there are a lot of different regulations in this state, and really crafting a climate solution, if we can also be addressing some of our other regulatory issues, I think that's very important, because there are a lot of them. And one of the reasons we didn't have dairy digesters in the beginning, when Secretary Vilsack said, you're going back to California from USDA, you have the most cows in the country and the fewest dairy digesters. And I said, well, sir, we have air regulations, and we have groundwater regulations, and we have water quality regulations, and we have nutrient management regulations, and they all have to work together to get to at least the permitting process. And that was one of the first ones on this particular one, which is why the makeup of our science advisory panel is very crucial, because it brings together our important partners from the Air Board, from the Water Board, and those other things. So if you can think about a solution that can do like SWEEP did, but also some of the alternative manure management and Dairy Plus projects we have right now, they're providing clean water. They're vermifiltration, and vermicomposting, but that's reducing greenhouse gas emissions. It's giving us this nutrient-rich product that becomes a potential revenue stream for farmers, which is what we need to think about, not just the crops they grow or the commodity they send to market, but it also is producing cleaner water, and water that doesn't take treatment to improve the distribution of their lagoon water onto the farm. So they're saving water, they're improving their nutrient management, and trying to think multi-benefit that way has been really key. Obviously, cost is always going to be it, which is why the incentive dollars are so important. It's a de-risk strategy that hopefully the business case will prove itself out, and that's how we get the really adoption at a broader scale. So I would say that, and just being trusted enough to be able to do that, which is up to the really important part of Farmer to Farmer and their organizations that have leaned into this.
Yeah, and I think that last point is really important. Just something that we talk about a fair bit is just kind of the hesitation or skepticism. I really, before I came here, of course, I knew about the work of the Clear Center and telling that story, right? And it's really important to be able to do that. And so I think, those demonstrations and really showing those success stories is something that I think that the department has really done an excellent job of really promoting that as well. So, you talked about your move from being in DC, right? And it's very interesting times right now for us, and just thinking about how you're still continuing to advance these initiatives and to reach these goals with changes in federal funding. And so I would love for you to just address that.
Yeah, so the uncertainty at the federal level has just been something that it's a fact of life, but we also have to recognize the scale at which California was able to invest in the programs that we have came about because of how California chose to set up our programs, which was on a market-based program, which at the time was called cap and trade. By capping emissions and selling credits, and it's generated the revenue that through policy was reinvested in agriculture and other sectors. And so that has allowed us to be in a position to to do more from a statewide level. And then that led to several other jurisdictions doing similar approaches. At the federal level, I do want to point out that the Dairy Plus program, the $85 million that came to California through the Research Foundation, was actually funding that was made available through USDA under the current administration. All of those grants got put on hold. They had to be rewritten to not address certain things like climate, diversity, equity, but they were rewritten because what we were directed to do is make sure everything we do is farmers first. And that's already been talked about. Farmers first will help us bring more people into this. And so there are ways of working with funding that is available, but the large amount of money that had originally been dedicated to climate did leave, and that's going to make it harder and more important to think about how will a potential waste stream or byproduct be created that could be a revenue source, and the markets have to pay a place in that. And how do we all work together on climate financing? I can't agree more on how important that is for success here and globally. And I know you've seen that every jurisdiction that you've worked in.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, just these issues, they cross the political boundaries, right? I mean, that's why, I mean, it's wonderful just seeing how many people we have here from all around the world to discuss these issues, but even within our own country of how we approach things and talk about them, and there's so much that we can really work on together, and just trying to position that really well. And then just, thinking about the collaborations and just, how the state has worked with UC and just how we work through these obstacles and really how we work together to really drive innovation and adoption. So I would love your insight. Like I said, you've been an amazing partner.
So I love smart people. And I think it's really important, and Frank has been such a contributor to this, but there's so many people throughout your college in particular. We are seeing the need to do even more interdisciplinary research more, but I think it's really important to sit down with the folks who are in the research realm, who are willing to ask the hard questions, including pushing us at the policy side as well as on the producing side. That's really important. It's also important to think about the producers who are willing to potentially take a risk or step up and be first, and being able to identify that so that our researchers know they've already got some folks that are willing to do the on-ground application, but also walk a researcher through the practical application of all the technologies we're trying to deploy nowadays. And so those two things really have to go together. Just understanding the global reach of a UC system, the fact that it's a land-grant university with this very strong public service commitment, in addition to education and research and equipping the future generation of leaders. Like all of those ingredients make UC for us like a no-brainer. Plus you're only 20 miles from Sacramento. That doesn't hurt a thing. I just thought I should add that. And again, it's through the land-grant universities that have extension. So you've got people in every county as trusted advisors at the local level, helping you surface what will work, but you also are outstanding on the science side. And if we can't lead with science, we won't have a durable solution. It's not about political shortcuts. It's about science-led, peer-reviewed science. Yeah.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I think that strength across our teaching, research, and extension, and blurring the lines with that, and just and how we listen and get information out, but the science informed policy and being very science driven, those are very, very important. Again, I have to applaud the Clear Center in doing such a great job in really getting that science.
And I want to say Frank has been such a leader. One of our biggest challenges has been animal agriculture is not always popular in certain sectors. I hate to say that to any of my friends from the animal sector. And the environmental justice voice in Sacramento is very, very strong and very effective. And so that's been one of the uncertainties. And the establishment of the Clear Center and Spark have really been about the importance of communicating science and engaging with and communicating with people in a clear layman's terminology to show all the things we have in common in solving these problems together. So I just want to say it's a challenge, but the communication aspect is critical to actually making policy work.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And you were mentioning a minute ago about just the global aspects of these issues, and also just thinking about the work that is accomplished here in California, the research that we do working with our producers and industries, and then the work with the state, and how that then really influences or connects around the globe. So I would love your thoughts on that.
So I'll go back. We have MOUs that we've established in a number of countries with other at the subnational level as well as at the national level, and it's really about understanding how academics, because they're doing research on different continents on different schemes, academia is like the door opener for us. I really mean that, because you've already established, we're very blessed at the University of California. I know we're not the only ones to have fabulous talent here from around the world on staff as well as students. So that kind of gives us a head start on those types of things. And then being able to do farmer to farmer and business to business on the practical side and the business side, because they have so much more in common than their differences. The economics of what they're doing, the weather, the climate, the pests, the diseases, whatever it might be, which is why, by the way, I'm a huge champion of One Health. It's absolutely critical. So just want to put that plug in. And then it's also that government to government. And, there's some government structures that they don't even start solutions until they've got the researchers and the business or the farmers at the table. So it's like this triangle of people working together. I'm still aspiring to make it work that way, Frank, in Sacramento at least. But those things that it's a more natural approach with people with shared language, shared expertise, shared practical experience, as well as policy, and how do we balance all the policy trade-offs we have to make. So those are the ways that I think can work. That's what we isn't that right, Virginia? That's what we're still doing, right?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll take that. Yeah, and I can't help but think a little bit, we were talking earlier about some of the federal programs, some of our international programs through USAID we lost. And I do think that, thank you very much. And I think that we've been able to position ourselves really well for as some of those. I know Ermias and others have been working on some great work with the vet school. It's a great example of One Health. When you mentioned that, that's definitely something that came to mind. But I think California cannot lose that global perspective.
That would hurt us as much as everybody. And I do want to call out our friends from FAO, because the transformation livestock sector report, this is a huge, huge thing. And I think it brings even more alignment around all of the topics we're talking about here today, and others, One Health too.
Yeah. So, all right. Yes, this one here. This question? Yeah, this is a good question. So there are a couple of questions in here that are really similar, and I'm looking forward to hearing your answer on this. I think it's a great question. So just thinking about how different regulations impact our industries. Sometimes in California we can have a lot of them, right? And just how that influences industries like dairy that are they leaving California, heading to states that might be more friendly regarding certain types of regulations? And so how do we advance our initiatives around reducing methane? But yet we still have to balance the sustainability of businesses, as you were talking about at the very beginning.
So that is easier said than done, because the complexity of our regulations, because of how many years they've stacked up. whenever they add a new regulation or pass a new law, nothing comes off the books. And so we have to, our programs are actually built on some pretty antiquated, regulations. So the stackability of that, are there ways for us to streamline the complexity of that and the data that could be pre-populated? We don't have very digitized government or databases that talk to each other. So those are ways for us to think about doing that. We've just done a regulatory alignment study for 3 years with our colleagues at EPA and the State Water Resources Control Board on 2 of our most recent and very complex and somewhat expensive regulations. One is our Irrigated Ag Lands program, and the other one was our Food Safety Modernization Act compliance under produce rule. Both of those, water is a through line of that, and there's a lot of overlap, and sometimes there's redundancy and sometimes there's conflict. And how do we streamline those types of things? There's no magic answer, but it's just a fact of life. The cow numbers in California are very similar to what they have been. They're holding steady. The productivity of our cow numbers continues to increase because of genetics and other great work that's come out of this school in particular. So, but the growth, because of our environmental footprint, growth of new dairies is primarily happening in other places, partly because people want production closer to where they're transporting some of that, because transportation is a big cost in the food system. It's also a lot of the emissions factors. So we have to understand all the factors, including buyers and the retailers and others that weigh in on this very long food value chain that we live with.
Yeah, great. Yeah, great insight. Yeah, so here's a question. So as you looked at the future of agricultural methane work in California, what priorities matter most? And where can research contribute the most value? So, especially as attention expands from manure management to feed and nutrition strategies. So, what priorities matter most, and where can research contribute the most?
Well, obviously, feed efficiency is something we can continue to work on here, and I know it's happening here, but it's also a key important strategy for globally, really improving feed efficiency and understanding that interplay with emissions. And thinking about, for us in California, we have long been a feed deficient state. We don't grow nearly enough of the products we use. So thinking about alternatives crops that would be drought resistant and very low water use could be a multiple way of thinking about a problem. And like, do the plant genetics and the livestock genetics and the feed efficiency solutions all give us still an economical feed for dairy and other livestock here? Thinking about the importance of our beef sector, we're not, dairy has really been at the forefront of this because of how the law was written and where the most likely solutions were. Beef in this state is on 25 rangeland beef is 25 million acres in the state. It's an important part of our landscape. It's an important part of improved grazing practices that mean cleaner water coming out of our watersheds down into municipal water supplies. And it's now being recognized as a critically important part of wildfire mitigation because of good grazing practices. So how do we think about what those benefits are that we want to capitalize on and help that be an economic solution for those producers? And at the end of the day, the consumers have a big voice in this. And the more that we can demonstrate our sustainable ways of producing great tasting, healthy, nutritious food, the better it is to be able to engage consumers that in a day of social media, where things have to be balanced out, and that I think there's many bottom line reasons for us to continue this work, and really strong partnerships with research as well as with the ultimate buyers that are consumer facing, that want to make sure that our food supply chain is something they're reinvesting in as part of their third tier reporting requirements.
Well, excellent. Well, I tell you, there we've had some more questions come in. I wish we had more time. But I think for cocktail, I mean, there's a good AI question. We've got some other questions in here that would be great to do. And so, but thank you so much for, oh yes, it's been amazing being here. Absolutely love it. I love the partnership, and just thank you so much for sharing with us today. So if y'all could give Secretary Ross a round of applause, that would be wonderful.